Win big in 2024 with RotoBaller.com's MLB Premium Pass. It includes our preseason draft kit, 15 exclusive lineup tools, and the Team Sync platform. Get customized rankings for your specific league format. Sync your leagues with Team Sync and use your new live draft assistant. Then get customized advice for your scoring settings. Get a discount for any MLB Premium Pass using my promo code KNUCKLER. Just visit rotoballer.com, sign up today, and start rotoballing like a boss.
Break out the red panties.
This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral link and my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. Free contests. Getting those Parlay Play player prop contests. Whole lot of fun. Great platform over there. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 128 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. And we've got UFC Vegas 88 this weekend.
Break out the red panties.
And UFC 299 was last weekend. Sean O'Malley battered Marlon Chito Vera over the course of 5 rounds. Really put on a dominant display. Dustin Poirier gets the knockout over Benoit Saint Denis. That was a sizable upset there. Petr Yan gets back in the winners column. MVP with a great UFC debut where he really was just teeing off on Kevin Holland over those 3 rounds, styling on him. I know that's a phrase that's been used over the last week, but it really was impressive how at this level and against Kevin Holland, who now all the people that don't like MVP are going to say that that Kevin Holland isn't good enough.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie.
There are people out there that just do not want to admit that Michael Venom Page and a lot of the Bellator fighters are good fighters. And MVP was just teeing off on Kevin Holland the whole time. But folks, this week, we've got Tai Tuivasa versus Marcin Tybura. It's a UFC Vegas, UFC Apex Fight Night. Starting at 4 p.m. on Saturday, so I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 2 to 3 p.m. and onward. Come out, let's talk about your DFS and sports betting thoughts for UFC Vegas 88. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. I make picks for all major MMA organizations, regional promotions, Cage Fury, Cage Warriors, LFA, PFL, Ryzen 1, anything that's out there, and a whole lot more on UFC Fight Pass. I make picks for it on Twitter at RotoBrady, and follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. We've got 13 fights on the slate for Saturday, starting off with the bantamweight matchup between Charalampos Grigoriou and Chad Anhelinger. Lightweight, Mitch Ramirez against Thiago Moises. Thiago Moises, who was supposed to fight Brad Riddell at first. And Gregorio was supposed to fight Toshiomi Kazama before Anhelinger steps in. Women's strawweight, Jacqueline Amorim against Corey McKenna. Josh Kulabau at featherweight against 8-1 Danny Silva. Flyweight, Ode Osborne back in there against Jafel Theo. Bantamweight, Josiah Nunez against Chelsea Chandler. Mike Davis versus Natan Levy, 8-1 Natan Levy. At lightweight, Gerald Mearshart against Brian Barberena. Fantastic matchup for what these two guys, still bring to the cage. That's it, middleweight, obviously. Great fight. Bantamweight, Pandy Kianzad against Macy Chiason. Featherweight, Christian Rodriguez, 10-1 as a pro against the undefeated 6-0 Isaac Dolgarian. Light heavyweight, Kennedy and Chekwu back in there against Oven St. Preux OSP. Welterweight, the co-main event, Angel Losa against Brian Battle. Brian Battle making an appearance in a co-main event.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie.
And, of course, a main event that a lot of people are going to be upset about, especially the fact that this is at an Apex and not just like on the main card of a pay-per-view in a foreign country or something. Tai Tuivasa, currently ranked number 9 in the world according to Tapology, against Marcin Tybura, respectively ranked 11th. Let's get into it. Anhelinger against Grigoriou. Grigoriou is the minus 166 favorite. Anheliger, the plus 140 underdog. 12-7 is Chad Anheliger, nicknamed the Monster, 37 years old. He started off with a win in the Contender Series by split decision back in 2021. Got a third-round TKO against Jesse Strader February of 2022. Has now lost 2 straight at the UFC level against Alatang Ali, and Jose Johnson. He was finished by third-round rear naked choke the last time out against Jose Johnson. You know, like, the Contender Series win and his UFC win are both just kind of Contender Series level. And so far, he has not proven that he can exist at the UFC level. Before being in the Contender Series, is a lot of opponents without double-digit, amounts of wins, in Rise FC. So he never did a whole lot before the UFC, and especially at his age right now, to make me think that this is a place that he can hang around. Charalampos Grigoriou, the ferocious, 8-3, 31 years old. He comes out of Cyprus, the country. 6 wins by knockout, 2 by decision, 0 by submission. He is now the winner of 3 in a row. Actually, 4 in a row. The loss was a grappling competition. Came in from Cage Fury and Combat FC. There's not a whole lot to this guy's professional career either. The Contender Series win with a first-round knockout, I think that's a little bit more impressive than what Anheliger accomplished in the Contender. I don't know. I think all things considered, I think these guys both have proven that they can win at the Contender Series level. One just happens to be 31 years old. The other happens to be 37. Honestly, it's hard to... Anheliger's faced some decent competition since he's been in the UFC. It's just like, now he's 37. I think on that alone, and, I think the professional resumes being very similar before they came to the UFC in terms of the kind of the weighted quality. I think Grigoriou wins this fight. I think he probably wins it 70 to 75 times out of 100. Give me minus 166. There we go. And, if I was going to go with a prop here, I would actually probably go Grigoriou by TKO knockout plus 230. Grigoriou is kind of a, maybe a sleeper option in DFS this week, but I don't know just how low that price will be. Next up, we've got Thiago Moises and Mitch Ramirez at lightweight. Moises, the minus 375 favorite. Mitch Ramirez, the plus 295 underdog. Let's start off with Thiago Moises. Only a winner of 2 of his last 5 fights. He did win 4 of 5 between May of 2019 and February 2021. Wins over the likes of Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, and Alexander Hernandez. Kurt Holloway in there too. Losses to Beneil Dariush, Islam Makhachev, Joel Alvarez, and last time out, Benoit Saint-Denis by second-round knockout. But before that, he did get 2 straight submission victories over Melquizael Costa and Christos Giagos. So, another case where I think that, even though those wins were now 4 years ago, that 3-fight winning streak he went on was really impressive. And I'm not going to hold it too much against him that his last 3 losses are Islam, Joel Alvarez, and BSD. Mitch Ramirez, on the other hand, 8-1 as a professional, 31 years old, 5 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 1 by decision. Comes in from LFA. He has 1 fight in the Contender Series, but it was a second-round knockout loss to Carlos Paredes. Some wins over, 2 wins over opponents with double-digit victories and Tough Enough and ex-MMA. His fight in LFA, LFA 173, was actually after his Contender Series fight that he lost. It was a first-round knockout over Arian Tavares. So, the real thing is, I don't want to think about this one too hard. I think that, especially Moises, his last 2 wins were by submission. He is the 2 wins before that were by decision. This is one where, Mitch Ramirez has proven so little coming into this with just the 1 LFA win and not even a Contender Series win. And Thiago Moises doesn't strike me as a guy that might be asleep at the wheel for this one or anything like that. I think Thiago Moises wins this fight like 85, probably 85 times out of 100. I think I would split, exactly how I think the outcome measures, Moises by submission and Moises by decision. Now, I do respect Mitch Ramirez stepping into this situation, and I think that, he does maybe have a place in the UFC for the quality of fighter he is. You're just starting off against Thiago Moises, which is a really rough draw, but you're definitely going to get some credit with the UFC for stepping in and what is a not ideal situation. Next up, we got Corey McKenna and Jacqueline Amorim. Amorim, the plus 145 underdog. McKenna, the minus 175 favorite. Let's start with Corey McKenna. Winner of 4 of 5 fights in the UFC, and it's the weirdest one that she lost because she beats, Vanessa Demopoulos, a veteran of the sport in the Contender Series, then Kay Hansen, both by unanimous decision. She loses a split decision then to Elise Reed. Elise Reed, who was, deserving of the spots she got in the UFC, but has done mostly losing in the UFC with her only wins. She does have that win over Jinh Frey. So I don't want to say that, it's that weird. But it is weird because then she goes on to, get two straight more wins against Miranda Granger by round 2 Von Flue choke and Cheyenne Vlismas by unanimous decision, although she hasn't fought in the UFC since December of 2022. Amorim lost to Sam Hughes by unanimous decision in her UFC debut, got outstruck 46-12. She did get 2 takedowns. Last time out against Montserrat Ruiz, dominated her 86-6 in the striking, 1 takedown each, 4 submission attempts before she ultimately gets the TKO in round 3. So she absolutely battered Montserrat Ruiz, who has is now on a 3-fight losing streak. Sure. But it was an impressive performance. And this is again a situation where I think that it was a nice submission by Corey McKenna the last time out. I still think that, the majority of given night, she's going to win, on the judges' scorecards against an opponent that she beats. I think that, McKenna has really set herself apart with this winning streak. And, the loss to Elise Reed, it was a split decision. It was a really close fight. I don't remember thinking that Corey McKenna won at the time. I think I was pretty set on Elise Reed. But I would have to, go back and review that one for posterity. So I think McKenna wins this fight like 70, maybe, I would say 70 times out of 100. I don't hate minus 175. McKenna by decision, plus 120. I don't hate that at all. And if I was going on Amorim, I'd just go straight up plus 145. I don't think that's a horrible number at all. And what is, I think, going to be a close fight, or at least as close on paper. And, so plus money is never a bad thing there. Josh Culibao versus Danny Silva at featherweight is next up. Culibao, the minus 185 favorite. Danny Silva, the plus 154 underdog. Let's start with Josh Culibao. Winner at 3 of 6 fights in the UFC with that draw against Charles Jourdain back in October of 2020. His only losses are to Jalen Turner, Charles Jourdain, and Lerone Murphy. It's a pretty good slate of opponents. And he had 3 wins in a row from May 2021 to February of 2023. 2 decisions against Shailan Nuradambeki and Sungwoo Choi. And then a submission victory over Melzik Bagdasaryan. It was that loss against Lerone Murphy last time out, July of last year. Outstruck 59-23, taken down 3 times and knocked down once. That was the blemish since that winning streak. Danny Silva, born in 1997, got a unanimous decision victory over Angel Pacheco September of last year, landed 204 strikes. Now, Pacheco landed 197, so it was a very close fight. Silva got the knockdown and 2 takedowns still. That's why he ended up getting it on the judges' scorecards ultimately. Culibao, despite what I have in my head of him, he's never been a high-volume guy. He's never, even in decisions, never landed more than 53 strikes in a fight. But he's just really good at, limiting, what his opponents are able to do to him. Except in the case of Lerone Murphy, and Jalen Turner. He even outstruck Charles Jourdain 46-44 and got a knockdown in the fight. Now, Charles Jourdain was, attacking the submissions in that fight, so it ended up being a split decision draw. But, so Danny Silva, too, just a quick note about him before the UFC. He is 8-1, 27 years old, came in from LFA. His LFA opponents, the three of them, had a combined record of 14-3. So that's pretty good. He's coming off a win against 4-1 Alex Ortega. Had a majority decision loss to Kenan Kawaihi before that. I don't know. I'm not ready to say that Danny Silva is like a major threat to Culibao here. However, Danny Silva...
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie.
I think that this is a point where you can prove that you're one of the fighters that is going to rise up in this division. Culibao seems to be a really good measuring stick. The people that he's beaten, they're good, but I think that there's a ceiling there. The people he's lost to have, been, fighting very well. So this is a good measuring stick fight, and I'm kind of surprised that it's as close as plus 154 with Culibao, having such a solid record in the UFC. The volume of the striking for Danny Silva does concern me for Culibao, but I think that if I have to measure who the better fighter is here, I think that Culibao being able to land his 50, 60, maybe even 70 strikes if it comes down to it. Who do I think is more likely to win the MMA fight? It's Culibao, and I think that, the other option here is that Danny Silva throws, and gets another triple-digit night and Culibao can't keep up. I think that plus 154 is just not a good enough number for a guy that we haven't seen past the Contender Series. Give me Culibao by decision, plus 145, hit it. Not that I feel that strongly about it, I just think that's by far the best pick of the fight. And if I'm, and then after that, that's the thing. I don't know as much about how I think Danny Silva finishes it. Maybe he wins the fight by decision. I think that's probably the most likely, plus 325. But I just feel better about Culibao by decision overall as the most likely method of victory. Next up, we've got a flyweight matchup between Jafel Fio and O'Day Osborne. Osborne is the plus 130 underdog. Fio, the minus 155 favorite. Let's start with O'Day Osborne, the Jamaican sensation. O'Day is a guy that has had some great activity, over the years. Never goes too long without fighting, and he's fought some really good fighters, and it's just hard to get a measure on this dude. I think he was very briefly in the UFC rankings at flyweight, and it's like, he started off in the Contender Series. The win against Jerome Rivera never means much to me. That guy did not look good in his time in the UFC, but like with O'Day, the wins are Jerome Rivera, CJ Vergara, Zaruk Adeshev, and Charles Johnson. Those last three wins are about of a similar level. And a split decision against Charles Johnson in what was a really close fight, 60-48 in the striking for Johnson, but 3-1 the takedowns for O'Day. He knocked out Zaruk very quickly, and he knocked out Jerome Rivera quickly. He did get outstruck again by CJ Vergara, but ended up, getting the judges' nod in that one back in November of 2021. And then, the four losses, right? Brian Kelleher, Manel Kopp, Tyson Nam, and Asu Amabayev, who we just saw in action. That's four fights that he was put away in one way or another. I think it was actually 2 knockouts and 2 submissions. So O'Day Osborne, kind of a measuring stick for the flyweight division as well. Tyson Nam is tough against a lot of people. But, all 4 of those guys that he lost to are really solid fighters that you would never be surprised to see in the rankings in the UFC in a given year. As time passes, just objectively measuring those guys at their peak, they're probably very close to ranked fighters at the very least, talking about Kelleher and Tyson Nam. Fio, born in 1993, winner of 2 and 3 at 2 of 3 in the UFC level. Counting the Contender Series where he got a third-round knockout over Roybert Echeverria. There we go. Echeverria. And then an arm triangle July of last year against Daniel Perez. His one loss by third-round neck crank to one Muhammad Makayev.
cannot do this. You cannot do this, you know?
Yeah, that's a tough fight for a person very new to the UFC, for it being Muhammad Mokaev. I don't know. Fia really has looked quite impressive in his wins, and it's hard to judge him too hard for a Muhammad Mokaev loss. I think really, like, Fia is Osborne's kind of worst nightmare. Like, just a dude that, if he's as good as we think that he might be, because if Fia really is a guy that can rise up this weight class, I don't see a way. I see O'Day, doing his thing, probably getting slightly outstruck, landing some nice shots. That's a good fight for him. But Fio, I just see as being a guy that O'Day Osborne is not better than. O'Day Osborne to me is closer to or Jaffa Fio is closer to the Asus and the Kelleher's and the Cobbs, I think, than he is to the Johnsons and the Zaruks. The question is it too early? I don't think so for Fio. So, what I'm going to say is that Fio wins this fight probably like 60, 65 times out of 100. Minus 155, not a bad number. I think you get Fio inside the distance, plus 110. Hit that! And if I'm going O'Day Osborne, I'm going by decision, plus 500. Not a bad number at all. And I think that these guys are playable in DFS for sure. I think that, either probably less for O'Day, but I think he's going to be cheaper. Next up, we got a women's bantamweight matchup between Josiah Nunes and Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler is the plus 124 underdog. Nunes the minus 148 favorite. Let's start with Chelsea Chandler. 1-1 in the UFC. She got a win by first-round knockout TKO in her debut over Julia Stolyarenko, outstriking her 38-12. That was October 2022. Her last fight was a loss by unanimous decision to Norma Dumont, outstruck by a margin of 47-22 and taken down 3-1. Norma, though, her only 2 losses since February 2020 in the UFC are to Megan Anderson and Macy Chiasson, and she's on a 3-fight winning streak right now that includes wins over Carol Rosa. And her next fight is Germaine de Randamie. Can't wait for that one. Can't wait to see Germaine back in there. Josiah Nunes, born in 1993, she is 3 years younger. She'll be at a 1-inch reach disadvantage. She is the winner of 3 straight in the UFC against Bo Malecki by first-round knockout TKO. Then 2 straight decision victories over Ramona Pascal, and who she outstruck 98-52. She did get taken down 3 times, but she landed 2 knockdowns. And then against Zara Faern, outstruck her 117-102, but she got the unanimous decision. I remember rooting for Zara really hard at the time because I think I had money on Zara as an underdog. And I tried to will myself to thinking that Zara won by decision, but it did not work out that way. Yeah, I think that the volume that Josiah is going to be able to throw at Chelsea on the feet is going to be too much. I think that this fight is appropriately closely handicapped. But I think that the line is very accurate because what I saw against Zara Faern, it was Nunes never really in danger. It was just like the points fighting that Zara employed. And to land 98 and 102, in her last 2 fights over the course of 3 rounds, and to land 52 strikes and a knockdown in her UFC debut in a fight that ended in round 1, 3 knockdowns in 3 fights. I think that, first of all, that Josiah probably wins this fight like 65 to 70 times out of 100. So minus 148, hit it. And I don't know exactly how it happens. If Chandler was like a plus 165 underdog, I'd probably be closer to that. But Nunes, again, I think it's just proven way too much, and I think it's just going to overwhelm Chelsea Chandler on the feet. Nunes by decision, plus 300. By TKO knockout, plus 185. I think that's reasonable. I think both of those numbers are very fair. Honestly, I think you're better off just going minus 148 and making that work for you and going with Josiah Nunes at a fair price in DFS. Next up, we've got a lightweight matchup between Natan Levy and Mike Davis. Mike Davis, the minus 500 favorite. Natan Levy, the plus 380 underdog. Let's start with Mike Davis. Lost his first 2 fights in the UFC to Sadiq Youssef on the Contender Series and Gilbert Burns. Since then, 3 straight wins. A third-round knockout TKO against Thomas Gifford. Granted, that was all the way back in October of 2019. He landed 139 strikes, 2 knockdowns, 2 takedowns. Then 2 straight unanimous decision victories over Mason Jones, where he landed 108 strikes and 3 takedowns. And then against Vyacheslav Borshev, 65-63 in the striking for Davis, and 9 takedowns to nothing.
Break out the red panties.
Natan Levy, born in 1991, he'll be at a 1-inch reach disadvantage. Winner 3 of 4 at the UFC level. Both these guys haven't even fought since December of 2022. And so Natan Levy on a 2-fight winning streak, technically, not technically, he is. 2 unanimous decision victories where he landed a combined 159 strikes and 15 takedowns against Mike Breeden and Genaro Valdez. Breeden is 1-4 in the UFC. Valdez is 1-3. So it hasn't meant a whole lot, those performances, but they were good fights. They were good performances for him. It just doesn't mean a whole lot for this fight against a guy like Mike Davis, who, has unfortunately had his activity level hampered, but has looked very, very dangerous when he was able to fight. Natan Levy's 1 losses to Rafa Garcia. He outstruck him 47-35, but got taken down 7 times to 3. That made all the difference. Garcia, that's the best opponent Natan Levy's faced in the UFC. Even he is only about, kind of close to a 500 fighter. And Natan Levy, before he came to the UFC, was in LFA, he was in LFA pretty much his entire professional career before that. So, how does it happen? Mike Davis, I think you got to pick something for Davis. I think it'd be very fair to include him on a parlay, but why? At minus 500 and the different activity levels of both these guys, I think Natan Levy is he's not actually that much older than I thought, only a year. But, I just don't love minus 500 even for a parlay with the guy, with just the activity level of both these dudes. Davis by decision is minus 115. I think that's a lot closer. Davis by TKO knockout plus 225. That's a very interesting split of those props, considering him being a minus 500 favorite. And then if you're going to Natan Levy, I think you go by decision too. Levy by decision plus 550. That's not a horrible number, but being a plus 380 underdog, I guess you might, I don't think there's much of a difference in value there. But I don't know. I think Davis does win this fight 80 times out of 100. I don't know about minus 500. It's just there's question marks there that make me wary of that number. But Mike Davis is definitely a guy I'm looking forward to watching this weekend. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Brian Barberena and Gerald Meerschaert. Meerschaert, the minus 238 favorite. Barberena, the plus 195 underdog. Let's start with Brian Barberena. Bam, bam. I guess you could have gone with Brian the Barbarian Barberena, but I read his name as Barbarian sometimes anyway. Brian Barberena, done a lot of fighting in the UFC since 2014. Fought a lot of really good fighters and a lot of big names. Sage Northcutt, Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, Jake Ellenberger, Vicente Luque, Randy Brown, Jason Witt, Darian Weeks, Matt Brown, Robbie Lawler. That brings us to where he's at now, because that was a 3-fight winning streak from Darian Weeks to Robbie Lawler, where he got 2 decisions and then a knockout against Robbie Lawler and landed triple-digit strikes in all 3 of those fights. He's now on a 3-fight losing streak. Fighting Matt Brown and fighting Robbie Lawler when he did in 2022, not the same as fighting RDA at the end of 2022. RDA, we saw him this past weekend. I don't care what anybody says. That dude still looks fantastic for his age and against the guys that they're asking him to go against. Good win for Gamrot, I suppose. He fought a very Matouche fight. But Barberena got submitted by RDA, and then he got submitted by Gunnar Nelson March of 2023. Just lost a unanimous decision where he got taken down 3 times and knocked down twice by Mahmoud Muradov. Gerald Meerschaert, born in 1987, he will have a 5-inch reach advantage. 1-3 in his last 4 fights is Gerald Meerschaert. This is a guy whose activity level has been solid, about 2 or 3 fights a year. The problem is, losing the majority of those, Granted, losses to Eric Anders, Ian Heinisch, Hamzat Chimaev, Christoph Jacko, Joe Pfeiffer, and Andre Petrosky. It was a close fight with Petrosky that he got a split decision in. He got outstruck, landed the biggest shots of the fight, got 2 takedowns to 1. Meerschaert's last win was August of 2022 that he won by 3rd-round submission over Bruno Silva. Before that, you got to go back to December 2021 against Dustin Stoltzfus. Yeah, I don't know. Barberena has been asked to fight better fighters, even over the last 3 and over the last 6, I think. And, I think that Barberena is going to land with volume here. I think that could be a problem for Gerald Meerschaert. Barberena hasn't been knocked out since he fought Randy Brown back in 2019. Meerschaert, it's just like the Petrosky, it wasn't just, it was the strength of Andre Petrosky for sure that, helped to lead to that. Just his ability to control the fight more. That's how he got the split decision. And it's hard to judge him too hard for his losses, but Meerschaert did beat Mahmoud Muradov. This is one where, I could see me using Brian Barberena in plenty of DFS contests. Plus 195, I think that's just a little too low now that I think about it. I think that, Barberena is more rightfully, a plus 225 underdog in this fight. Or not rightfully, that's where I would like to get him if I was going to. Meerschaert, I do just think is the better mixed martial arts fighter. And it's just not going to be a fight where you just agree to fight Barberena's fight. Or at least you really, really shouldn't if you're Gerald Meerschaert. So I think Meerschaert does win 65 to 70 of these fights out of 100. I don't love a straight up victory here, on the money line. Meerschaert by submission though. Plus 110. Give it to me. And if I'm going Barberena, I don't know. I guess I do just go money line or, let's see. If I'm going Barberena, maybe I do go either knockout or decision. Barberena by knockout is plus 500. By decision is plus 450. Wow. That's kind of crazy for just being a plus 195 underdog. So, I don't know. I think Meerschaert is, the best number by submission. But, it's just very hard for me to discount Brian Barberena when you know the fire that he can throw. It's just hard to see Gerald Meerschaert not jumping for a guillotine or something and being able to land it on Brian Barberena over the course of 3 rounds. Next up, we've got a women's bantamweight matchup between Penny Kianzad and Macy Chiasson. Macy minus 230 as the favorite. Kianzad is the plus 190 underdog. I feel like Macy suckers me in every time. Let's talk about Macy first. Macy, winner of 3 of her last 5 fights, loser of 2 of her last 3, though. So, February of 2020, and by the way, this is a rematch. Macy Chiasson got Penny Kianzad by second-round rear naked choke at the Ultimate Fighter finale back in November of 2018. Since then, wins over Gina Mazzani, Sarah Morris, Shanna Young, Marianne Renault by unanimous decision. Her last win is against Norma Dumont. Kind of, I think, caught a good amount of us by surprise. And it was by split decision where she got outstruck 38-32, but she landed 6 takedowns. Her only losses in the UFC, her first one was to Lena Landsberg. But the last 2 fights, just to Raquel Pennington by second-round submission and Irene Aldana by third-round knockout. So it's been only good losses for Macy Chiasson. It was kind of a close fight for Macy Chiasson before she got finished by Irene Aldana, at least on paper. Pani Kianzad, they were both born in 1991. Macy will have a 6-inch reach advantage in this fight. And this is the weird part, right? Macy lost to Lena Landsberg. Pani just beat her April of 2022. So fight winner-loss match just does not work. Loser at 2 of her last 3, a unanimous decision against Raquel Pennington, and a unanimous decision loss against Caitlin Vieira. 4 wins in a row before the loss to Pennington to Jessica Rose Clark, Beth Correa, Sajara Eubanks, and Alexa Davis. All of her fights after the Ultimate Fighter finale have all been unanimous decisions one way or another. And the issue is, I think that if you were comparing resumes, Macy probably has the better wins and the higher quality losses by a slim margin in each. But I don't think anything changed about this matchup, for Macy and Pani. I think that this is still Macy Chiason's match. I think the reach advantage proves too much. I think in a fight where Macy Chiason is getting done on the ground too, and she's also got it working on the feet. I know that sounds like obvious, but Macy can make decisions really close, whether it's with the grappling or whether it's with the strike. But in a fight that I think that she's going to be in an advantage in both departments, even slightly, that is one where I'm going to say Macy wins this fight probably 70 to 75 times out of 100. I definitely am not including minus 230 for Macy Chiasson in anything here. I think that this fight does probably go the distance this time, and that is minus 330. Now, like Macy inside the distance, or like Macy by sub or plus 600, Macy inside the distance is plus 300. That's one to look at just because, it's hard to believe sometimes that a rematch would have an exact same result. I don't know. It's hard to pick a method of victory when so many of your fights go to decision, but now you're fighting a fighter again that you finished. But I think Macy by decision, ultimately minus 110. I think that's probably the best pick. And if you like Pani, you go Pani by decision plus 225. It's just much harder for me to see a path to victory for Pani Kianzad. And I think that she would really need to be aggressive, take away Macy's reach advantage. And I think that, I very clearly see how Macy wins this fight, and I'm still struggling to see how Pani gets it done this time. Next up, we've got a featherweight matchup between Christian Rodriguez and Isaac Dolgarian. Dolgarian is the minus 198 favorite. Rodriguez the plus 164 underdog. Let's talk about Isaac Dolgarian first. Winner of his UFC debut, piecing up Francis Marshall 35-2 on the feet in round 1. Also got a takedown. Very dominant performance in his UFC debut. 6-0 as a professional, 27 years old. Currently ranked as the world's 74th best featherweight. I'm sure that could very well move up very soon. Came in from FAC, not a super well-known organization, but I think his body of work in the UFC, at least right now, speaks for itself. Christian Rodriguez, 10-1 as a professional, only 26 years old. 3 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 3 by decision. His only losses by decision. And this is the wild part, is the fact that Christian Rodriguez is the underdog. He seems so much more brand new to me than he actually is, but you look at who he's beaten the last 2 times out, this is crazy. Is Cameron Simon, by unanimous decision, outstruck him 83-73, 3 takedowns. Christian Rodriguez then beat Raul Rosas Jr. before that by unanimous decision. He only landed 29 strikes, but Raul Rosas Jr. is a guy that every time that it's like a Sean O'Malley thing. If he looks a little weak at times, he comes back and you go, okay, that guy is legitimately very good. Sub Joshua Weems before that in round 1 with an anaconda choke. Won his debut in the Contender Series, outstriking Reyes Cortez Jr. 78-47. This guy does get taken down sometimes. That could be an issue against Dolgarian. But his only loss is to Jonathan Pierce in the UFC. By unanimous decision, he got taken down 6 times. He did still come up on top in the striking numbers. But Jonathan Pierce, that is a very high-quality loss to have taken. And to be coming off wins against Raul Rosas Jr. and Cameron Simon, I don't care what Isaac Dolgarian did in his UFC debut, as impressive as it was, there is just too much there for Christian Rodriguez for me to say that this isn't a fantastic pick at plus money. I think Christian Rodriguez wins this fight 55 to 60 times out of 100. Lock of the week so far is Christian Rodriguez plus 164. Hit it!
Break out the red panties.
And, as far as outcome, because I think both these guys are worth, a very good-looking DFS. As far as an outcome, I'd probably say Rodriguez by decision, plus 400 somehow. And Dolgarian, I just don't see too many numbers that I love for him. By decision is plus 225. By knockout is plus 275. I'd probably go with Dolgarian by decision plus 225 in that situation. Just in putting up, maybe a higher volume of strikes that hit harder. Because I don't know enough, to say that Christian Rodriguez loses and gets knocked out, because he's only ever lost once in his career, and it was on the judges' scorecards. But that is a very interesting matchup, and it makes me nervous that Christian Rodriguez is the underdog, because when I look at it, I get very excited that he is at plus money. Next up, we've got a light heavyweight matchup between Vince St. Preux and Kennedy Nchegwu. Nchegwu is the minus 700 favorite.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
And OSP is the plus 500 underdog.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie.
I don't even know what I meant by those sound drops, but I feel like they're appropriate right here. Let's start with OSP. This is tough because OSP has been in the UFC for a long time. It's been a long time since he's done a lot of winning. My God. And not only that in the UFC, but in Strikeforce dating back to 2010. This guy has fought so many good fighters at 205 pounds over a long stretch of time. 2 wins over Shogun in his career. 2 losses to Nikita Krylov, but wins over Marcus Rozier de Lima, Yushin Okami, Corey Anderson, Tyson Pedro, Michael Alexijuk. And that is where you get into this era, and that's where it gets very problematic for OSP, who was born in 1983. Loser of 4 of his last 6 fights, 3 of his last 4 to Jamal Hill, Tanner Boser, and Felipe Lins. It's the fact that Tanner Boser and Felipe Lins were able to put him away so early and so easily that's very concerning. The only win since its September 2020 victory over Alonzo Minifield was again against Shogun. Shogun, who, by the way, was born in 1981, and that only happened about 2 years ago, and that was by split decision. Nchegwu will have a 3-inch reach advantage, insanely, and is almost a decade younger. The African Savage. His last 3 wins have all been inside the distance. 2 knockouts over Carl Roberson and Ian Kutalaba, and a submission against Devin Clark. Kennedy, a guy that's kind of struggled to get over that hump of, the kind of right outside the rankings, top 15. Like, he's able to crack that area, but then just took a loss to Justin Jacoby by first-round knockout August of 2023. And he's never fought someone crazy good, but none of his opponents dating back the last, 5-6 years have been bad opponents. They've been good measuring sticks. It's just hard to get a read on Kennedy, but not for this fight. All right. To OSP in this fight, for the love of God.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
This is not going to end well. The fact that the only win for OSP in that stretch of time has been Shogun, the fact that Kennedy has picked up 3 wins since July of 2022, and Dustin Jacoby still remains a very underrated light heavyweight. This guy's in a lot of close on paper fights, but this is a fight that I just cannot go with anything other than Kennedy by TKO knockout. That's minus 225. Kennedy is very worth a play in DFS. Minus 225, I feel confident enough in that, or in Kennedy just inside the distance, minus 330. Either one of those, I feel very confident in at least placing it in a parlay. it's just weird when you got such a heavy favorite, and all I can do is agree with the odds makers in this one. I just wish OSP wasn't fighting in this because I hope it's not the case. It'd be crazy if OSP came out there and looked like the OSP from 2014, 15, 16. There's just almost no chance that that happens on Saturday. So that's where I'm going with Kennedy. Kennedy wins this fight like 90 times out of 100, 90 to 95, unfortunately. Next up, we are to the co-main event of the evening. A welterweight matchup between Angel Lusa and Bryan Battle. Bryan Battle is the minus 180 favorite. Lusa the plus 150 underdog. The UFC knew that even though Bryan Battle, probably not a guy that's ever going to be a champion, fight for a championship, be a top seller, they know that people really like Pooh Bear. Because I really like Pooh Bear. He's a likable guy, and like it's fun to watch him, go through his career right now. Because I do think that this is a guy that is in fun fights, and at a certain level, he's very competitive. I do think that there's a ceiling there, but still. So let's start off talking about Bryan. Oh, and now he's the Butcher, by the way. Bryan the Butcher Battle. It's scarier than Pooh Bear. I don't necessarily like it more. Winner of 5 of 6 fights at the UFC level. So there was the Ultimate Fighter finale against Gilbert Urbina. Then he beats Tresean Gore handily by unanimous decision, landing 112 strikes. Knocks out Takashi Soto in little work in the first round of August of 2022 at UFC Fight Night Santos vs. Hill. God, that's a long time ago. By unanimous decision, he lost to Rinat Fakhretdinov. He got outstruck 43-3, got knocked down, got taken down 7 times. That was a thorough loss. 2 straight finishes, though. Looks revitalized once again against Gabe Green, a first-round knockout May of 2023, and then a second-round rear-naked choke against AJ Fletcher at UFC Fight Night Fazia vs. Gamro. I remember the evening well. So I think that those quality of wins speak for them. Like Gilbert Urbina and Tresean Gore haven't looked good since then. Takashi Sato hasn't. Rinat Fakhretdinov, then fights to a draw against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Again, this is where the ceiling kind of comes in with Bryan Battle. But I think the 2 wins against Gabe Green and AJ Fletcher paint a pretty clear picture of kind of the level he's at right now. Angel Lusa, the last ninja, will be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage. He was just about a year older than Bryan Battle, or a little bit more. Lost his first 2 fights in the UFC, both by unanimous decision against Jack Della Maddalena, understandable, and Munir Lazez, who outstruck him 141-88. Bounced back with 2 straight victories over AJ Fletcher and Reese McKee. Both by unanimous decision. That last fight was September of 2023. He landed a combined 227 strikes against McKee and Fletcher and 8 combined takedowns. Lusa looks fantastic over these last 2 fights, and it's against a very comparable level of competition. One of the same opponents as Bryan Battle and AJ Fletcher. This is the concern, is like Bryan Battle, I think, is going to be well served to really pour it on early in this fight. And I just don't know if I like him enough as a favorite in this one. I think that this is a really close one. I think this is almost 50-50. I think the reach advantage could be a problem for Lusa, but ultimately, I think that the resumes are just too comparable. And Lusa's volume and if he ends up getting 1 or 2 takedowns, especially if this goes to the judges' scorecards, I think it's those 2 things that are going to be the biggest problem for Bryan Battle in this one. I think this is about a 50-50 matchup. Give me Angel Lusa plus 150. And so if I'm going Lusa, I go Lusa by decision plus 275. If I'm going with Bryan Battle, I'm going inside the distance plus 250. I think Lusa by decision plus 275 is the much better number. But if I'm picking for Battle inside the distance, I think that's the best prop. I just don't think plus 250 is as good for plus 275 when if Lusa is winning this fight, it is by landing upwards of 80, 90, 100 strikes, maybe getting a couple of takedowns, and limiting the volume of Bryan Battle. I think that there's 2 clear paths that you can see for each guy to win. I just think Lusa's path is actually a lot clearer. And now we are to the main event of the evening, the heavyweight matchup between Tai Tuivasa and Marcin Tybura.
Break out the red panties.
Tybura, the minus 118 favorite. Tuivasa, the minus 118 favorite. Tybura, the minus 102 underdog. Almost even money this fight. I think you can still get it at even money in several locations. So, let's go ahead and start off. Let's start with Tai Tuivasa. A guy that a lot of people are upset that he's in an Apex event where there's not going to be fans. You know, it's not going to be as exciting when he drinks the beer out of his shoe if he gets a knockout victory. It does seem like a waste to waste such a crowd pleaser on no crowd at all. In fact, I'll give it this. I don't mind events being in the Apex, but I don't think that a main event in the Apex should be wasted on a guy that is a fan favorite and is electric to watch live, that people, love to interact with and like to see what he does. So, Tai Tuivasa was being talked about for title implications, in 2022, because he was on a 5-fight winning streak that included Stefan Struve, Harry Hunsucker, Greg Hardy, Augusto Sakai, and Derek Lewis, friend of the podcast, Harry Hunsucker, and he put them all away by knockout in either the first or the second round. This is a guy of streaks. Like, he opened the UFC with a 3-fight winning streak that was capped with a win over Andrei Arlovski. Then he went on a 3-fight losing streak that included losses to JDS, Blagoy Ivanov, and Sergey Spivak. I kind of miss Blagoy Ivanov. That's weird of me. And it's weird that he fought last year. That seems like a guy that was in, a UFC video game 4 fights ago. Probably not, but still. I love the guys that are, just hang around the UFC heavyweight rankings. Always have. Now, after that 5-fight winning streak, he's on a 3-fight losing streak, and it's hard to blame him for these 3 losses, right? A knockout loss to Cyril Gane, who pieced him up 110-29 on the feet. They each did land a knockdown.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
Sergey Pavlovich put his lights out December of 2022 by first-round knockout at UFC Fight Night Thompson vs. Holland. And in September of last year, he got subbed in round 2 with an Ezekiel choke, courtesy of one Alexander Volkov. Tai Tuivasa does have a 75-inch reach, born in 1993, and Marcin Tybura, born in 1985, with a 78-inch reach. Always crazy. I always forget that Marcin is that much older. And it's more concerning here, too, because, Tybura is a guy that doesn't get finished as much, because he doesn't open himself up to those risks. That's the kind of fighter that he is. And I don't think Tai Tuivasa is going to give him an option at all, which I think is probably the best approach here. Tybura, a guy of streaks, too, sort of. Tybura lost 4 of 5 between November 2017 and September 2019. Losses to Fabricio Verdum, Derek Lewis, Shamil Abdurakhimov, and Augusto Sakai. He, too, holds a win over Andrei Arlovski early in his UFC run. He was on a 5-fight winning streak between February of 2020 and June of 2021. A lot of activity. He fought 4 times for a heavyweight in 2020. Got wins over Sergey Spivak, Maxime Grishin, Ben Rothwell, and Greg Hardy. That was only 4 that I named. And Walt Harris. And now, in the latter 2 against Harris and Hardy being by knockout. He's still won 2 of his last 4 fights, but those 2 came in a row. So he lost to Alexander Volkov by unanimous decision, outstruck 75-58. That's exactly how we thought that fight was going to play out, right? A well-balanced kickboxing match that Alexander Volkov was always going to get the better of. But, winner in 2 of his last 3, 2 decision victories where he only landed a combined 87 strikes and only 1 takedown against Alexander Romanov and Blagoy Ivanov. Just winning rounds, man. Just steadily, point by point, winning rounds. That is Marcin Tybura. Last time out, July of last year, a Fight Night main event. He got put out quickly by Tom Aspinall, and Tom Aspinall was on his way to much better things. So, 3 of his last 4 losses are by knockout. Tybura and Tai Tuivasa, they both fought better fighters. They've both fought guys that it was probably a waste of time to see them against. It's, Tuivasa getting the knockout over Derek Lewis is a big thing, just to see that, like, no matter who it is, he's going to go in aggressive. That's good to see against Tybura, because what Tybura does is just win rounds point by point. And I just don't think that Tai Tuivasa is going to give him that opportunity. I think that this fight is appropriately, very closely handicapped. However, I do think that Tai Tuivasa, because of that aggression level and the fact that he's the younger dude, he's going to hit with the harder shots, he's going to come forward and not let Marcin Tybura slow him down. Tai Tuivasa, I think, wins this fight 60 to 65 times out of 100, maybe a little bit more. Minus 118, hit it!
Break out the red panties.
And here's the important thing, prop-wise. I could see using Tai Tuivasa in a lot of DFS lineups just because he's going to win by knockout if he wins. And that is plus 110 for him. Hit that again. And for Tybura, if you're going Tybura, you think that what he actually is a better stand-up fighter and mixed martial artist than Tai Tuivasa. And, if you're believing in Marcin, you do believe that he is going to still, that Tai Tuivasa is a guy that he can point fight against and at least get 2 out of 3 rounds. Tybura by decision plus 650, that is worth a look. Let's see here. No, there's no real sound drop for Marcin Tybura, I would at least say.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
It's a winnable fight for a guy that is so one-dimensional and a guy like Tybura that is just so balanced. I just think as the younger fighter, the greater, stronger force, Tai Tuivasa can win this fight by knockout and go out to the roaring applause of very, very few people. Maybe drink a beer out of a shoe of one of the few, journalists or what have you that might be there. But, folks, that is it for UFC Vegas 88, episode 128 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. Again, I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 2 to 3 p.m. on Saturday, 2 to 3 p.m. onward. Come out, chat with us. Let's talk about your DFS and sports betting thoughts for UFC Vegas 88. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. I make picks there for all major and regional MMA events, combat sports events, big boxing events. For that and other takes, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady and follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Have yourselves a great weekend. March Madness is starting. The spring football season is right around the corner. It's a great time to be alive. Enjoy it all. Soak it in. Peace.